2 copies is better than 1, and it's a lot better than 0. So it's extremely positive. Let me know if you guys watch Dry Creek Wrangler in the comments. Or just let me know anything in the comments. Anyway, let's be very direct. Why did I empty out my 401k and spend 6 months alone in isolation to write a book? Well, first thing is that there is a problem that plagues so many people. It was plaguing me, and it plagues me still from time to time. And in the most direct way that I can say it here, people leave the world. People choose to leave this world by their own hand. They can't stand the life that they're living, so they seek to leave the world, and they follow through. They leave us. But that's not the only way that people do an act that is synonymous with that. Sometimes people are so dismayed with this life, this world, the life that they're living, who they are, that they don't leave this world by their own hand in one instance. They do it slowly over time. And they spend 60, 70, 80 years burying their true self. And I was in that situation before I quit my job. I was drinking too much alcohol. I was eating foods that were hyper palatable rather than foods that my body needs. And I was doing all of that because I became empty. And I became empty because I got success from focusing on the tree. But then it reached a point where instead of focusing on the tree, I was focusing on the fruits. And so I implicitly knew that that's the direction that people go sometimes. And I didn't want that for myself. It wasn't really a matter of doing it in an instance, but I could definitely see a pathway that I would bury my true self over time. I would bury my true self. And I think a lot of people know this feeling that I'm describing, that causes us to cling to vice. It's a feeling that the sensation of it is like drowning or starving. It's like drowning because you can't catch your breath, you're anxious, depressed, you've got all of these negative emotions, and you just keep reaching up for something to save you, but you can't find something to save you. And it's like starvation because you feel empty inside, and so you reach for these vices, these worldly things, but they don't nourish you. And the more that we reach for the wrong thing, we become empty. And now here's the thing. I talk about God all of the time. I love God, obviously. But it's an abstract thing to say that you're going to reach up and it's going to be God's hand that pulls you out of the water and saves you from drowning. Yes, that is what happens. But if you're not careful, God will save you, and then God will have to keep saving you because you then don't play your part after God pulls you out of the water. And I now know what my part is. I know that there is a part. I know that everybody has a part, i.e. a purpose in this world. But I didn't know explicitly at the time that that's why I was so empty. And I've talked about this word before, but there's a Greek word that we don't have a translation for in the English language, and it is philotimo. And rather than try to describe that word, which is kind of something like, you could say, a love of honor, a love of purpose, a love of doing what's right and not expecting a reward. Key point, not expecting a reward. And we just don't have a word for that in English. There's no English word. And language, the words that we think and the words that we speak, paint our reality. It's the frame in which we see the world and we see reality. And so the reason why I bring up that word isn't so much what that word means, but to acknowledge the fact that we do think in words. Words shape our reality. But we have to open our heart to the humility that even our words are insufficient. And so you could be trying to be aligned with God, you could be trying to do the right thing, but there's just something that you don't see, and it's not your fault. You just don't have the tools to even see it. And so I quit my job in fall of 2023, probably 2021, 2022, can't remember, but it was fall. Going into winter, a deep, dark winter. And before I started writing the book, I was trying to build an online audience because I wanted to make money off of the book. I had quit my job. I didn't have a pathway for income. So I was afraid. I had a desire for money, but more importantly, I had a fear that I was going to go homeless and a fear that I was going to starve. And so please notice that I've always wanted to be a writer. I quit my job to be a writer, yet I'm not saying that being a writer is my philotimo, my divine purpose, but it is part of the pathway. And rather than walking my narrow pathway we all have our own narrow pathways that all leads to the same place, i.e. heaven. Instead of walking my pathway, I was doing roundabout things. I was like, well, let me get an audience first. Let me do this. And it was all based out of fear. And so I'll make this short, but during that winter, I got incredibly sick. It was like January that I got sick, the dark heart of the winter. And I had the craziest dreams, bedridden for 3 days, raging fever nonstop, couldn't sleep, just eyes closed, lucid dreams. And on the third day, I had the most bizarre lucid dream that I've ever had. I was in my room in the house that I owned at the time, and I was looking at my own body that was laying in the bed. And it was so strange because the version of me that was lucid dreaming, I felt like I was in the place of death. I felt like it seemed to me like my life was over, but the person who was in bed, their life was still going on. I know it's the same person, but that's just the feeling that I had. And I was knocking on this invisible barrier in front of me, desperately trying to get my own attention to wake myself up, because there's something that I wanted to tell myself, and words can't really touch it. But I knew it. I had an understanding of what I wanted to tell myself, and I was like, if I wake back up, if I find myself back in that body, back into life, I know exactly what I'm going to do. And again, words can't really describe it. The only thing that I could say what it was to do is what I ended up doing, which was I stopped making videos because videos were an excuse. Videos were and still are a good thing. I love to do it. But they were an excuse that was stopping me from doing what I was meant to do, which was write a book. And to go back to this word philotimo, it's something like a divine purpose and doing what is right without expecting a reward. And so I had to empty out my 401k, go all in into writing this book. And not only could I not think about a reward, it was my desire for the worldly rewards that was ruining me up until this point. So I had to deliberately work against getting a reward. Meaning I couldn't have an audience in my intention at all. I couldn't try to write this book for the sake of selling it. I couldn't write, even after I had written it, I ended up finishing writing it in June of, I can't remember the year, but it was June, following that winter. It was the most accomplished, satisfying, satiating feeling that I've ever had. And I bring that full circle because that feeling of drowning, that feeling of despair, that feeling of emptiness that is kind of like starvation. I'd been feeling that for so long, but the moment I was finished with the book that I was intentional about it bringing me no worldly rewards, and I didn't want to corrupt that, so I was like, I'm not going to try to sell this at all. I wanted to do that for its own sake. It was the writing of this book and writing the book for the sake of writing it and nothing more, that finally satisfied me. And you're right, if you're like, well, when you're drowning and when you're starving, spiritually malnourished, get the food from God. Reach up and it'll be God's hand that saves you, yes. But I think God is saving us for a reason. There's something that we're meant to do. And maybe we can have a choice. We can follow our interests. That's the beauty of life. We can follow our proclivities and the things that we want to do as well. But there is something that we have to do, and it has to be a philotimo. It has to be doing what is right without any desire for reward. And that is the solution for this thing that is plaguing so many people right now. We're unsatisfied because even when we're doing the right things, sometimes we're doing them for the wrong reasons. And sometimes the way to fix that is to deliberately work against the fears and desires that are within us. And that way we can ensure that we're doing the thing not for the reward, but for its own sake. Not for the reward, but for God.